It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Question: how can it be that so very few, even now, ever notice that our once deep blue skies are gone? And what do we have in exchange? Filth-filled skies and climate chaos. From the New York Times, quote, "The risks of experimenting with the sun. What could go wrong?" The Times then states, quote, "This technology could never restore the climate, but would further destabilize an already disturbed climate system, leading to unforeseen and irreversible ecological disasters and severely affecting current and future generations." Let's stop there. For the record, all that was just stated is now, not somewhere off in the future. And about future generations, there won't be any, short of a complete course correction by our species, starting with stopping toxic climate disruption operations. If there's any chance of altering the current trajectory, the effort will take all of us. And this, also from this week, solar geoengineering might help cool a warming Earth, but research into risks is lacking. That's from Samora4.com. Yes, research of the consequences is absolutely lacking, or at least not being disclosed. Should that come as any surprise? I think not. And then there is this from foreignaffairs.com. The battle over blocking the sun. Why the world needs rules for solar geoengineering. The report states, solar geoengineering is widely believed to be among the cheapest and least complex approaches to climate mitigation. Wait, cheap and easy? Question: how cheap is it to destroy the planet's life support systems while contaminating virtually everything in the process? And how easy is it to fix the damage once done? It won't happen. This is a one-way ticket to hell on Earth. More from the Foreign Affairs report. The basic idea of stratospheric aerosol injection draws inspiration from volcanic eruptions that cause temporary global cooling by blowing sulfate particles high into the atmosphere. Let's stop there again. All current studies now prove volcanic eruptions create only a very temporary toxic surface cooling, followed by an accelerated warming and damaged ozone layer. Sound familiar? The report continues with this. Policymakers have given little attention to the potential dangers of unilateral stratospheric aerosol injection. Translation: jet aircraft sprayed filth in our skies. Again, for the record, the term potential dangers is a gross understatement regarding an atmospheric jet aerosol spraying assault that is decimating the planet's remaining life support systems and ubiquitously contaminating the entire biosphere, all of which is officially denied across the board. The Foreign Affairs article continues with this, quote, "None of the treaties and customary international law provide for any meaningful constraints or any specific regulation of stratospheric aerosol injection or solar geoengineering." Once again, should that come as any surprise whatsoever? No laws to regulate the international dumping of tens of millions of tons of highly toxic nanoparticles into our skies, completely disrupting and derailing weather everything, destroying the ozone layer on which all of our lives depend, and completely contaminating the entire planet. What could go wrong? No laws, no regulations, not an accident, part of the plan. The Foreign Affairs report, titled "The Battle Over Blocking the Sun," continues under this heading, Climate Wars. It is time for serious and open discussion of the risks posed by stratospheric aerosol injection and action to develop new rules, they say, and institutions to govern it before it leads to geopolitical strife or even warfare. If done without coordination, stratospheric aerosol injection has the potential to cause serious climatic effects in some regions, affecting food and water security and even human habitability. The risk of such catastrophic consequences may be perceived by a state as such a threat to its national security that it justifies using military force to prevent another state from engaging in climate engineering actions that would cause such harm. States have viewed foreign interference with water and food security as an act that justifies war. From earliest history to the 1977 Convention on the Prohibition of Military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques reflects the extent to which states have more recently viewed climate modification as a potential threat to national security. The defense and intelligence establishments of the United States and many of its allies already characterize the similar consequences of climate change as threats to national security. Similar meaning similar to climate engineering, both causing immense damage and a likely cause of increased incident of armed conflict. Moreover, a range of national and international institutions, including the White House and the IPCC, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, largest scientific panel on any subject in human history, their job is to cover the tracks of the climate engineers, have identified unilateral stratospheric aerosol injection as creating the risk of geopolitical instability, including the risk of war. The international law regime governing the use of force would provide only a modest constraint on states that perceived their vital interests to be at stake, as events in Ukraine and elsewhere over the last few decades have tragically illustrated. International law prohibits countries from using force against other states, with only two exceptions. One, when authorized by the UN Security Council, or two, when used as an act of self-defense in response to an armed attack. Given the deep divisions among the Security Council's permanent members, it would be highly unlikely that anyone could obtain a consensus to authorize use of force to stop unilateral stratospheric aerosol injection. Nor would a use of force in response to the threat of unilateral stratospheric aerosol injection efforts come within the traditional doctrine of self-defense. But we may predict that states would either try to expand the doctrine or create new exceptions to the prohibition on the use of force. Ultimately, stopping states from launching stratospheric aerosol injection efforts on their own will require a new multilateral treaty, with the primary purpose of prohibiting unauthorized deployment of stratospheric aerosol injection and establishing a collective decision-making process for approving and governing any potential future use. Given the planetary implications of stratospheric aerosol injection, such an agreement must be truly multilateral, with fair representation for countries most vulnerable. Although addressing SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection, under the UN is controversial, SAI clearly implicates the Convention's core purpose of preventing dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The Foreign Affairs report then states, quote, "The U.S. government has historically taken a dim view of solar geoengineering in international climate talks." That's just their effort of covering it up. They then say this: U.S. intelligence communities now acknowledge that unilateral stratospheric aerosol injection poses considerable geopolitical risk. What is certain, the report states, is that as the climate crisis intensifies, the temptation to deploy technologies to artificially shade the planet will only grow stronger over 75 years and ongoing. The report then says this: guardrails must be put in place before a solar geoengineering experiment or unilateral deployment destabilizes the world's climate patterns. Too late. A robust governance regime is needed, not only to mitigate the direct risks of unilateral stratospheric aerosol injection, but also to reduce the chances of armed conflict in response to such interventions. This is all going on behind the scenes now. Global climate conferences, smoke and mirrors, behind the scenes, forcing countries to actively or passively participate in this insanity. Final statement from the Foreign Affairs report: the stability of the global climate and potentially international peace and security may depend on it, aka life on Earth in the balance, exposing and stopping the climate engineering assault. Let's stop there and summarize all that I just covered from the Foreign Affairs report. First, the we could, may, might spray the Earth's skies with toxic climate engineering elements someday narrative is far past being worn out. There's no could, may, might, someday. We're over 75 years into this global Manhattan Project from which there is no return. Anyone that still believes some benevolent council will be formed with equal representation from all countries to govern stratospheric aerosol injection and to tell the superpower countries what to do or not to do is living in an alternate reality. The biggest bullies on the block, or in this case in the world, do what they want whenever they want because they can, because populations even now refuse to face the truth on countless fronts. Refuse to band together, to stand up, to stop participating in the insanity, and to stop blindly following orders for those that are in the ranks of the military juggernaut of planetary decimation. Remember your oath. to protect your countrymen from all threats, foreign and domestic. They, those in power, those that print the money, those that run militaries, thus countries, couldn't do what they do without the active or passive support of the majority population. Again, this must change or we have no chance of even near-term survival on a rapidly dying planet. Nuclear Armageddon isn't needed. The wheels are already in motion, already coming off the bus, and the controllers are more desperate and dangerous than ever before. On that cheerful note, this is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it, literally, broadcast. Brought to you by geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. Only when those who are in a position to stop these programs from the inside out realize they are sinking the very ship on which they and their posterity depend. Only then do we have a chance of stopping this insanity in our skies. We can, and we absolutely must, reach a critical mass of awareness by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. Please help us to sound the alarm. Moving on. Countdown to collapse. Taken as a whole, the human race continues to sprint at full speed toward extremely near-term self-annihilation. From the UK Independent, UK food security hit by climate impacts at home and abroad, analysis warns. And it's not just the UK. It's everyone, everywhere, all at once. The Independent report continues. Western Europe has seen a very wet winter while the Mediterranean is battling heat and drought. British food security is being hit by double whammies of climate change impacts at home and countries it imports products from. Analysis warns key crops from potatoes and onions to wheat and sugar are being hit by damaging heat, drought, and floods around the world, pushing up prices and threatening food security. An assessment from think tank Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, that's the ECIU, says. But, the report states, while it is tempting to suggest that the UK should increase domestic production to make up for poor harvests abroad, Britain too is struggling in the face of climate impacts, the organization stated. Let's stop there, as this report and all others like it never ever mention a single word about the climate engineering elephant in the equation and the systematic targeting of agricultural regions, flash drought, flash floods, flash extreme hail, contaminated rain, killing root systems and soil microbiome. The list goes on, and about the pollinators on which global food production is so dependent. New from the UK Guardian. This year has been dead. Where have Britain's insects gone? Question mark. Then it says, what long-term data do we have? The report follows up with this. There are no rigorous long-term monitoring programs for most insects. Habitats are being negatively affected by pollution from pesticides, nitrogen, and even light. The climate crisis is also becoming an increasingly significant factor. Again, what isn't mentioned? Climate engineering, toxic rain, disrupted weather, everything, off the charts UV radiation, affecting all life forms. Geoengineering operations are inseparable from all of it. And about the insects, search bees/aluminum. Peer-reviewed study. Bees dying from massive aluminum exposure. They can't even find their way back to the hive. Symptoms that resemble Alzheimer's and dementia in a human being. How come that isn't headlines everywhere? Moving on the subject of insects, question, do the powers that shouldn't be view populations as insects at this point? An increasing liability that they're trying so hard to control or to eliminate? Also from MSN, state attorneys general urge government to recognize major new disasters. People are suffering and dying. End of headline. 14 attorneys general from U.S. states and the District of Columbia are urging the federal government to recognize extreme heat and wildfire smoke as major disasters. The push comes after heat advisories plagued much of the United States in recent weeks, and ongoing wildfires devastate portions of the western U.S. It's much of North America, certainly Canada. And let's add this. Firestorm smoke canopies held down on the surface for days and even weeks due to ionosphere heater-induced relentless high-pressure heat domes. So many layers to this insanity. Another puzzle piece from Outside Magazine, how wildfire smoke affects your body and your mind. Question, is it all just wildfire smoke or just other things burning on the ground? Or could aluminum nanoparticles, which are a primary element named in climate engineering patents, be a part of the equation that's settling down through the smoke canopies? Did I mention that geoengineeringwatch.org recorded time-lapse footage of grid pattern blanket aerosol spraying directly above the Paradise Fire smoke canopy? Yes, toxic nanoparticles of elements like aluminum and barium, which are also incendiaries, an incendiary dust sprayed directly over a firestorm smoke canopy. Anything nefarious going on here? You decide. You can view this footage on the groundbreaking geoengineeringwatch.org documentary, The Dimming, available for free on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. More puzzle pieces. From the World Resources Institute, here's the headline. Latest data confirms forest fires are getting worse. No surprise. They say fires also making up a larger share of global tree cover loss. Fires now account for roughly 33%. Stop and think about that for a moment. With all the millions and millions of acres going up in flames with each passing year, that it still, according to the study, is statistically only a third of the total annual tree loss. The rest is from mining, logging, clearing forests, or farming. The World Resources Institute report then says this: nearly 12 million hectares, an area roughly the size of Nicaragua, they say, burned in 2023, topping the previous record by about 24%. Extreme wildfires in Canada, they say, accounted for about 2/3, 65%, of the fire-driven tree cover lost last year, end quote. Let's stop there. Yes, all that does sound bad, but is all of this a lie? Are the true statistics, in fact, far worse than this most recent report from the World Resources Institute states? Is there, in fact, a drastic downplaying of how bad it actually is? What's going on? A cover-up? Follow me through these puzzle pieces and decide for yourself. First, from CBC Canada, that's Canada Mainstream Media. 5 charts to help understand Canada's record-breaking wildfire season in 2023. And what do those charts show? This, that over 18 million hectares of forest incinerated in Canada last year. Not 8 million, as the World Resource Institute now states. Over 18 million hectares is about 45 million acres. Far larger than the U.S. states of Florida or Georgia. And that's Canada's fires alone. So should we ask, who actually controls the World Resources Institute, and why would they try to hide the true totality of global forest incinerations? Remember and consider those that print the money, that control the central banks, also control militaries, thus countries, thus conflict zones, and the many layers of events that are manipulated to justify mass military interventions, which in turn serve a multitude of agendas and objectives. Matrix media, of course, also in their control. They get to dictate the narrative and to tell the story, however departed from the truth it may be. Yes, history is indeed written by the victor, and all the while the planet is going down in flames, literally. And mainstream media is tasked with fueling normalcy bias in the population, downplaying the severity of what's unfolding until the brutal, bitter end. Question, how can anyone possibly think that any of this is even remotely sustainable? Because it isn't. It never has been, and it never will be. As I've stated so many times on this broadcast, man's war against nature is a war against himself. How simple can this equation be? Yet how few there are who are willing to open their eyes and see that fact. From wyonpulse.com, Greece wildfires. Race to save Athens. Greece seeks EU help to fight wildfires. Footnote, please go to the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Check the engineering wildfires section. Many important reports there, but 2 of the most important. Wildfires serve geoengineering agenda and wildfires as a military weapon. That's a 140-page U.S. military document with that title. Think about that. Next, spray and pray. The risky business of geoengineering Africa's climate. That's from MSN.com. Solar geoengineering refers to deliberate large-scale intervention in the global climate system to increase the amount of sunlight reflected away from the planet to reduce global temperatures. That's straight from the MSN report. Large uncertainties, they say, and knowledge gaps are associated with the potential of solar radiation modification approaches to reduce climate change risks. Yes, a very long list of downstream consequences, starting with creating and trapping far more heat than the toxic atmospheric nanoparticles reflect in the first place. Now let's add this from voanews.com. Here's the headline. Climate change wreaks havoc through large parts of Africa. Anything to do with climate engineering? You decide. And obviously none of this, the insanity in our skies and the weather havoc on the ground, is confined to Africa. With that in mind, the report continues. United Nations aid agencies warn climate change is wreaking havoc throughout large parts of the eastern and southern African continent, worsening the plight of millions of people struggling to survive conflict, poverty, hunger, and disease. Question: is that the final solution in the mind of the Matrix controllers? Is this, in their mind, the way to end famine and hunger, by getting rid of the famished and hungry, and then blame it all on nature? And for all those in first world nations that continue to try and convince themselves that they are somehow immune to what's already unfolding at blinding speed around the world, think again. As the planet's remaining life support systems unravel even further, first world citizens who are consuming the majority of the world's remaining resources are an even larger liability to the controllers than third world populations. The often armed citizens of America are an even greater liability still to the manipulators of the Matrix. Ponder that one. And while doing so, consider and remember the U.S. agencies like Homeland Security purchased some 2.4 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition all the way back in 2012. This type of ammunition is for one purpose only. What are they preparing for? Is this part of the final backup plan if the first waves of herd reduction don't adequately do the job? You decide. Next, new from CBS News, more climate engineering cover-up. Contrails last longer now, the headline says. Here's why that's bad for the climate. The report says airlines have tamped down on carbon emissions by flying planes at higher altitudes, but this comes at a cost. They say the higher flying aircraft are creating more contrails that last longer, worsening the industry's impact on climate change, a new study has found. They say contrails trap heat in the atmosphere, we know that, which in turn warms the planet, we know that. Let's ask this question. How does atmospheric humidity vary with altitude? The ability of air to carry moisture is inversely proportional to the temperature and density. It will decrease with an increase in altitude, aka less conducive to forming a condensation trail, not more, less. And let's not forget the high bypass turbofan jet engine, which is all commercial carriers, all military tankers, jet-powered fanned. 90% of the air that moves through that engine is not combusted, nearly incapable of making any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. Let's add this from the physicsforum.com. How does altitude affect humidity sensor readings? Humidity decreases, they say, like I just said, with altitude because of the decrease in air temperature and pressure. Summary. These are the laws of physics. This is why you don't have puffy cumulus clouds floating around in the stratosphere. Think about it. Matrix media and controlled so-called science sources are making it up as they go in an ever more desperate attempt to deny the shockingly obvious climate engineering operations. Moving on. About the probable near-term shutdown of the AMOC ocean current, which includes the Gulf Stream, and all the sources claiming that this will instantly trigger another ice age, as depicted on the Hollywood thriller The Day After Tomorrow. Again, no, not the case. Based on all available data and the most recent studies from IFL Science, the Atlantic Gulf Stream was unexpectedly strong during the last ice age. New study. Not shut down, strong. Explain that one. Research now published in the journal Nature has uncovered at least one surprise in the ice age climate. The Gulf Stream, which carries warm water northwards through the Atlantic, was stronger and deeper than it is today. That doesn't really fit with the coming ice age narrative, does it? So many sites and sources continue to push the patently false coming ice age narrative in spite of the endless stream of broken daily high temperature records, broken monthly high temperature records, broken yearly high temperature records, record high ocean temperatures, and though nighttime temperatures are almost never mentioned by anyone, they're rising twice as fast as daytime highs. And all of what I just stated is from a global perspective. So for those that are located in regions of the world that are getting constant manipulated flows of atmospheric moisture along with constant chemical ice nucleation and usually extreme hail with it, a direct result of patented processes of chemical ice nucleation and cloud seeding operations, I would ask that you consider the global perspective, not just what conditions are like in your own front yard. Final footnote about the likely near-term Gulf Stream current shutdown. That would only disrupt the planet's heat distribution, not stop the heat buildup or curtail it. New from NPR, the oceans are weirdly hot Scientists are trying to figure out why. They just can't figure it out, can they? Report says worldwide average ocean temperatures were in record-breaking territory for 15 straight months since last April. When the water gets too hot, fish and other marine species also struggle to survive. For example, the ocean water near Florida is so warm that it's threatening coral reefs. Not threatening, it's wiping them out. I report this week after week. More reports keep coming in. Scientists don't know for sure what's driving ocean temperatures into record territory, the report says. If the oceans don't cool off somewhat in the coming months, that would suggest that the Earth is heating up very quickly. Really. It took a team of scientists to figure that out, and they can't see or admit to what's taking place in our skies. Just another chapter from the Planetary Asylum. From theconversation.com, as ocean surfaces acidify, a deep-sea acidic zone is expanding. Marine habitats are being squeezed. No, they're not being squeezed, they're being wiped out. When you hear someone say, CO2 is great, the more the better, tell that to anything that's still living in the ocean. The report then states, due to rising concentrations of carbon dioxide in the ocean, its pH is decreasing, aka becoming more acidic. The study then states, from a global perspective, it is remarkable that already 41% of the deep sea is effectively acidic. Is that bad? Yes, it's beyond bad, but hey, who cares? We have Walmart and McDonald's. Nothing to worry about, right? More of what Matrix Media doesn't mention while pumping out non-stop scripted political theater. From thewatchers.org, Tropical Storm Maria makes landfall in Japan, bringing record-breaking rainfall, which followed record-breaking heat, by the way. Also from thewatchers.org, catastrophic floods in Yemen claim over 45 lives, destroy thousands of homes, farms, and properties. How many know about Typhoon Ampil? From the Japan Times, very strong Typhoon Ampil prompts storm warnings as it nears eastern Japan. From CNN, Japan orders thousands to evacuate as Typhoon Ampil strengthens near Tokyo. About Hurricane Ernesto from the Treasure Coast News, how strong will Hurricane Ernesto get? Question mark. Could the answer be as strong as the geoengineers want it to get? Going where they want it to go? You decide. From Yahoo News, hundreds of wind turbines are being decommissioned to make way for even larger wind turbines. That goes great with hurricanes everywhere, doesn't it? What a great idea. This will save us from ourselves, certainly, right? If the already huge wind turbines are huge failures, let's build even bigger ones. Just another day in the Planetary Asylum. There's more from MSN. Wobbling moon will cause devastating worldwide flooding in the 2030s, NASA warns. Coastal communities, they say, in the United States will be forewarned. A dramatic surge in high tide floods is just over a decade away in the U.S., and again, that's according to NASA. Some cities, they say, may see floods every day or two. So it seems NASA, who isn't known for their honesty, wants us to believe that the soon-to-be inundated coastal everything is just that pesky moon behaving poorly. Never mind the global climate disruption operations, never mind the global deforestation, never mind the incineration of over 100 million barrels of oil a day, never mind the burning of 26 million tons of coal every single day. It's just that pesky moon acting up. Just like the pesky beavers in Alaska that they blame global warming on. Been over many of such stories on this broadcast trying to point out the idiocy of the so-called climate science community. Nothing to see in our skies, they say. Right. Here's a question. Why aren't the climate activists saying a single word about climate engineering while they're gluing themselves to streets and chaining themselves to trains? And then there's the drill baby drill crowd that needs to face the consequences of that mentality and the fact that much of what's being drilled for is fueling geoengineering jets along with polluting every aquifer on the planet in the case of fracking. Here's more about the air we breathe along with the trees, what's left of them, breathing the same air or not. From theconversation.com, trees don't like to breathe wildfire smoke either, and they'll hold their breath to avoid it. End headline. The report continues. When wildfire smoke is in the air, which is now almost constant in so many regions of the world, Northern California for one, where I live, it's like living in hell, doctors urge people to stay indoors to avoid breathing in harmful particles and gases. But what happens to the trees and other plants that can't escape from the smoke? They respond, the report says, a bit like us, it turns out. Trees essentially shut their windows and doors, so to speak, and hold their breath. The report then says, as atmospheric and chemical scientists, we study the air quality and ecological effects of wildfire smoke and other pollutants. In a study that started quite by accident, they say, when smoke overwhelmed our research site in Colorado, we were able to watch in real time how the leaves of living pine trees responded. Next subheadline, how plants breathe. Plants have pores on the surface of their leaves called stomata. How many times have I brought this term up on this broadcast, along with the VPD, vapor pressure deficit scenario, that is radically impacting forests and crops alike around the world? Why so long for the so-called climate science community to finally fess up? About the stomata on flora, these pores are much like our mouths, except that while we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, plants inhale carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. More from the report. What makes smoke toxic even far from the fire? When wildfire smoke travels long distances, the smoke cooks in the sunlight and chemically changes. Mixing volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides, and sunlight will make ground-level ozone, which can cause breathing problems in humans. It can also damage plants by degrading the leaf surface, oxidizing plant tissue, and slowing photosynthesis. Again, this reminder, the now common blanket aerosol spraying operations taking place directly above the now continent-wide smoke canopies. Think about that. How much is that adding to the overall heat and contamination from smoke? New from theweathernetwork.com, all-time heat records shattered as Canada's weather turns upside down. From that report, an astonishing bevy of rainfall and heat records fell this week as a strange pattern enveloped Canada. It's hard to shatter all-time records, the report says, any day, but to see multiple records fall within the course of a few days takes some serious effort. Yes, quote, a strange pattern. Don't look up. Nothing to see here. From MSN.com. From California to Colorado, wildfires devour over 4 million acres. So far, and we're very early in the year, the climate engineers continue to cut off the flow of precipitation into the western U.S. and to bake it under an ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome. Moving on to Greece, that's being lahaina'd with blowtorch fires. From Reuters.com, people flee wildfire near Athens as it spreads like lightning. That's from the report. Residents fled their homes as fast-moving wildfires outside Athens, fueled by hot, windy weather, burned trees, houses, and cars, and sent smoke clouds over the Greek capital. Hundreds of wildfires have broken out across Greece since May, and scientists attribute their frequency and intensity to the increasingly hot and dry weather conditions linked to climate change. No mention of climate engineering, single greatest hydrological cycle disruption factor of all. After its warmest winter on record and long periods of little or no rainfall, Greece also registered its hottest June and July and is forecast to record its hottest ever summer. Blocking patterns high in the atmosphere, aka ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes, act like traffic jams, the report says, that lock conditions in place for days on end. Please search wildfires as a military weapon. Geoengineeringwatch.org. Learn what few want to know. Covert weapon of war. Next, record heat bathes the Arctic Circle. A ridge over the far north led to historic heat. That's from multiple sources. Think ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome, which steers upper-level wind currents, which steers moisture currents, manipulates the weather. From France24.com, Greece evacuates hospitals and homes as wildfires rage. Firestorms, flash floods, extreme hail, increasingly occurring back to back. How often do we hear the Matrix Media weather forecasting script readers use the term weather whiplash? When it gets too hot from ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes, which the geoengineers utilized again to steer upper-level wind currents, thus to manipulate the weather downstream, just spray patented processes of chemical ice-nucleating elements into cloud moisture. That will provide a temporary and toxic surface cool down. That will fix everything, right? Not so much. From CBC Canada, hundreds of Alberta farmers reporting damage following violent hailstorm. Some farmers grappling with complete loss of crops. Yes, extreme hail, now the norm around the world. Just nature or patented processes of chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. You decide, and please decide after you reviewed the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Moving on, new from climatecentral.com. Climate change is increasing dangerous nighttime temperatures across the globe. From that report, due to human-caused climate change, which for the record, climate engineering is inseparable from, 2.4 billion people experienced an average of at least 2 additional weeks per year where nighttime temperatures exceeded 25 degrees C. That's about 77, 78 degrees, something in that range, and that's a gross underreporting, by the way. The actual temperatures are worse. They're higher still. The report says high nighttime temperatures are detrimental to human health. These temperatures prevent the body from recovering from daytime heat, increase the risk of illness and mortality, and disrupt sleep. Short and poor quality sleep has a range of negative impacts on physical and mental health, cognitive function, and life expectancy. That doesn't sound good, does it? And now let's add some aluminum nanoparticles, barium, strontium, surfactants, polymer fibers, graphene, the list goes on and on. It's in our air and everything else. Try not to breathe, eat, or drink. Buckle up. We're in for a ride. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 471, August 17th, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News report can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. Geoengineering Watch wishes to express our deepest gratitude to all those that have helped us to expand our reach and thus our voice in this desperate last-hour effort to sound the alarm. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact books so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities, now north of 20 million views. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience about reaching those that still aren't looking up. Starting a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials can be a very effective key to the door. These materials can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward effectively. Very high-quality printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words, and we pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We also have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, shirts. Both have photos on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. And we have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. The business card's so easy to pass along. Scan it and go straight to The Dimming or geoengineeringwatch.org. Reaching a critical mass of awareness on the climate engineering onslaught is the great imperative of our time. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to find their courage, to step up to the plate and make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. And to all those who are steadfastly committed to this must-win fight for all that matters, all that we hold dear, as always, my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you. It's our collective efforts that can absolutely still make a difference even at this late hour. Never doubt the power of one, aka you. More nature blaming. From the Weather Channel, are trees making New York's air worse? ? They say trees are supposed to be good for the environment, but a new study reveals the complicated role certain trees play in hurting New York's air quality. Really? It's the trees' fault? The trees that are dying all over the world, and when they die, we will die? Much more detail on that in a moment. Stay tuned. And about the air we breathe and what can be spread in it, many official sources are now issuing warnings about the increasingly dire threat of birds spreading the next new pathogen. Question, is it rational to believe that the over 400 level 4 biolabs around the world are not up to anything nefarious on behalf of the powers that shouldn't be? Is it rational to believe that those same controllers would never utilize already ongoing atmospheric aerosol dispersion operations to distribute the concoctions that their biolabs are cooking up? You decide. And while doing so, consider the following. From the Washington Post, New York Times, Business Insider, IFL Science, and a long list of other sources, disclosed in 1977, it turns out that the U.S. military carried out 239, no less than 239, secret open-air tests on its own citizens. In Senate subcommittee hearings in 1977, the Army revealed that between 1949 and 1969, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted no less than 239 times. Imagine that. Why don't more Americans know this history? Too busy attending circus-like political rallies and pretending power structure controlled elections matter? More headlines from BusinessInsider.com. Florida residents should flee to other states before climate change decimates home values. Already happening there. Miami's spending, I believe, about $1 billion a year trying to keep their streets dry. Just the beginning. They say the best time to sell beachfront property is yesterday. A bubble spotting analysis reported. There's no solution for this coming calamity. Flood insurance costs will skyrocket since they're severely underpriced to climate risk. For the record, many can no longer get insurance at any price for floods, fires, and hail. Here's a recent report from the UK Guardian. Most people in petrostates want quick switch to clean energy, UN poll finds. They say largest ever climate survey also finds majority want countries to set aside differences to fight global heating. It will take more than a survey. The controllers are focused on arming radicals, which they can then use as a justification to build even more WMD. That's how it works. Peace is not profitable for them, not in their minds. Also from the UK Guardian, massive disinformation campaign is slowing global transition to green energy. UN says a global backlash against climate action is being stoked by carbon fuel companies. Well, yes, but also by the fact that there is no truly, quote, green energy. Both sources of energy are problematic. Neither will save us from ourselves. From the Sydney Morning Herald, last games of summer, question mark. International Olympic Committee boss says heat may force date change. About that headline, far sooner than almost any dare to imagine, the Olympic Games will be the least of our concerns. Near-term survival will be the theme of the day, and no stockpiling shiny metals won't save you. From the UK Guardian, U.S. Air Force avoids PFAS water cleanup, citing Supreme Court's Chevron ruling. The EPA says Tucson's drinking water is contaminated, but the Air Force claims the EPA lacks authority to order a cleanup. Let's translate that. The U.S. Air Force is telling the EPA to take a flying leap, and they, the U.S. military, will do whatever they want because they can. While far too many in the U.S. population, taken as a whole, don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be distracted from endless bread, circus, material consumption, and Caribbean cruises. The same is true for other first world populations, eyes wide shut, on autopilot. In the meantime, so many in first world populations are simply trying to survive another day. Can such an imbalance and such insanity continue? Short answer, no. And about the U.S. Air Force telling the EPA it can do whatever it wants, thus the ongoing climate engineering crimes in our skies, day in and day out, ripping apart what little is left of the planet's life support systems while contaminating virtually everything in the process. Again, try not to breathe and get that food shopping done while there's still anything left on the shelves. From AP News, Indonesia seeds clouds to block rainfall after floods killed at least 67 people while 20 are still missing. Probably not going to bode well for them. Cloud seeding involves dispersing particles into clouds to create precipitation, thereby modifying the weather. National Disaster Management Agency said the aim of their cloud seeding was to redirect the rain elsewhere and keep the search operation free of downpours which could hamper the rescue progress. Here's the takeaway. As Geoengineering Watch has always made clear, drought deluge scenarios are the hallmark of climate engineering operations. They are extremely effective at creating both. From ABC News, severe drought has returned to the Amazon, and it's happening earlier than expected. The report says there were around 25,000 fires from January until late July. Rivers have become too shallow to navigate. Consider and remember this, as Lyndon Johnson states at the beginning of every single weekly Global Alert News broadcast, on film on the record, former president of the U.S. stating, "We had the power to control the world's cloud layer then, 62 years ago, and he who controls the weather controls the world, because he controls food supplies and thus populations." But what about so-called global greening? I'm kind of all over the board here, but I want to cover quite a few bases in the little time I have left. Here's a troubling recent headline posted by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, Yale University, and others. Desertification was supposed to be the greatest environmental challenge of our time. Why are experts now worried about greening? Only a few carbon fuel industry paid experts, by the way. Stay with me. The global greening narrative is as off the reservation as the global cooling and coming ice age fantasies. First, From phys.org, trees may not cool cities during heat waves as much as previously thought. The findings published in Sustainable Cities and Society show that conventional climate models overestimated the ability of trees to cool during heat waves by 60%. Once trees reach a threshold temperature of around 34 degrees C, which is about 93 degrees Fahrenheit, the trees, try to protect themselves by reducing their circulation of sap. Here's the question. So why has it taken so long for the so-called science community to admit to what geoengineeringwatch.org has shouted from the rooftops for over a decade and a half? There's VPD to consider again, vapor pressure deficit, huge factor, forests to crops. Not enough atmospheric humidity for the temperatures as high as they're rising, so the stomata shut. Been over that many times. Photosynthesis also slows greatly at higher temperatures and grinds to a halt at 104 degrees. And none of this takes into account the now off-the-charts UV radiation levels, including UVC, DNA-damaging spectrum of UV radiation that's reaching the surface of the planet now. It's killing everything from trees to insects to plankton and food crops. Climate intervention operations, the atmospheric spraying, and the frequency transmissions that manipulate it are the core causal factor in the equation of unfolding ozone layer collapse. Not the only factor. Not saying that. Core causal factor, not officially admitted to. More on the true state of the trees and the depth of deception in regard to the global greening narrative. From the Washington Post, California trees are dying by the millions. And by the way, I don't care who reports this, I live in it. I live in the middle of a once thriving wilderness that is now deathly silent. Dead trees everywhere, getting worse by the day. And above it, raging climate intervention operations spewing their filth into my skies. From the Oregon Public Broadcasting Corporation, Douglas fir die-off in southern Oregon gives a glimpse into the future of the West Coast forest. It's absolutely brutal die-off. From crosscut.com, Pacific Northwest forests are heating up and drying out. From that report, aerial surveys documented what foresters have dubbed, quote, Firmageddon, the sudden death of millions of acres of fir trees, the predominant tree of western North American forests. And this, what's with all the dead pine trees? That's from Alaska Outdoor Forum. The University of Alaska said this, dead trees could bring new life to Southeast Alaska lumber mills. Great. Who cares about the dying, burning forest so long as the lumber mills can grind on a bit longer? So smart humans are. From Outside Magazine, what's killing Hawaii's trees? From Discover Magazine, the Amazon rainforest could die in your lifetime. And for the record, that statement applies even if you're already really old. The Amazon is dying by the day right now. From the National Institute of Health, climate-induced mortality of Siberian pine and fir. From National Geographic, the grand old trees of the world are dying. And from Yahoo.com, dead trees around the world are shocking scientists. I first began to sound the alarm on the dying of the trees in 2008. My first paid-for out-of-pocket, full-page Northern California newspaper ad, 2008. What took the so-called science community another 16 years to start telling the truth? And about the rapid demise of forests and everything else, many say and seem to think that, quote, we can just stop with the destructive human activities and everything will recover, right? Not so much. From MSN.com, plants needed millions of years to recover from past climate warming. Let's correct the record. More like tens of millions of years. But hey, who's counting? A few million years or tens of millions of years, one way or the other, does it make any difference at this point? MSN continues, Earth's geologic history is complex with major events like volcanic eruptions that changed landscapes and released ash and gas into the atmosphere. These eruptions often led to quick climate warming, affecting ecosystems and life. The clock is ticking, they say, and unlike plant species millions of years ago, we might not have the luxury of time to adapt. Well, that's a gross understatement. It's like saying you can adapt to leaping off a 100-story building and landing headfirst on the pavement below. You can't adapt to that. The study was published in the journal Science. It continues. The Siberian Traps event released some 40,000 gigatons of carbon over 200,000 years. The resulting increase in global average temperatures between 5 and 10 degrees C caused Earth's most severe extinction event in the geologic record. Again, over hundreds of thousands of years with a still intact ozone layer and a planet that wasn't contaminated with an endless list of elements, including ionizing radiation, which is about to go through the roof from nuclear power plant meltdowns and likely nuclear war. We've done what we've done to the planet in the geologic blink of an eye. about 200 years, not 200,000 years, which makes this event exponentially worse than any other. And as Earth's trees continue to die and incinerate at blinding speed, here's the magical solution from mongabay.com. Reforestation to capture carbon could be done much more cheaply, study says. You can't plant trees and have them grow in so many places of the world because they die. Success rate here, planting saplings in my region of Northern California, was 95% 20 years ago. Now it's zero. Zero. Nothing makes it through the first year. We have nothing but Pollyanna fantasy coming from the so-called science community. All the forests that are drying, dying, and incinerating aren't coming back in any time frame that matters. A sobering fact that torments my very soul is the trees have always been my silent, sentient companions during countless solo treks through the trailless wilderness. They are, and always have been, my friends. About planetary meltdown, new from the UK Guardian. We should have better answers by now. Climate scientists baffled by unexpected pace of heating. Yes, baffled and blind. If only they would summon their courage and look up and then tell the truth. Well, it can still make a difference. Question, is there actually a passage of scripture that states, not again by flood, but by fire? I don't know. But the planet is most definitely on the highway to hell. From the UK Guardian, unprecedented number of heat records broken around the world this year. Far from dwindling with the end of El Nino, records are falling at an even faster pace now compared to late 2023. The report says new ground is broken every day at a local level. On some days, thousands of monitoring stations set new records of monthly maximums and minimum highs. The latter is particularly punishing, which is nighttime temperatures, as the high nighttime temperatures mean people and ecosystems have no time to recover from the relentless heat. From livescience.com, Earth's climate faces risk of no return if warming exceeds 1.5 degrees C. Way too late for that. We are likely past 3.5 C since pre-industrial baselines, and they've simply hidden much of that by drawing a baseline across the graph halfway up the heating trajectory. That's a complete lie. They say the world's climate is teetering on the brink, and no one knows which way it will fall. They say experts have recently warned that the Atlantic Ocean current system could collapse as soon as 2050. Again, been over that lie. From this one from so-called Life Science, projections of the ocean current collapse are now as soon as 2025. Kicking in the door now. Another from The Guardian. How does today's extreme heat compare with Earth's past climate? Been over that. Happening literally hundreds of times or more faster than any previous mass extinction, which makes it equally worse. And here's surprisingly something of use from desmog.com. They say between optimism and despair, the messy middle paths through climate breakdown. They say the mindset at the root of the ecological crisis will continue to drive destructive patterns until we are forced to confront it. Yes, forced to confront it, happening now, much like climate engineering operations in our skies. Almost out of time, but here's a paradox I want to consider, and I hope all honest and sincere activists and individuals do. Sources and websites and individuals that claim to be fighting climate engineering, aka weather warfare, by actually denying climate engineering, aka weather warfare. It's all just jet exhaust, they say. So how does that work exactly? Claiming to be fighting for a cause and at the same time denying it? Working both sides of the fence? Personal agendas? You decide. What we're seeing in our skies are jet aircraft sprayed particulate dispersions. Countless film footage captures inarguably reveal visible nozzles being turned on and off. Up-close photos inarguably reveal retrofit nozzles on wing pylons aimed directly into the jet exhaust stream to make this look like, quote, condensation. No, it's not just jet exhaust. Some of these sites and sources are and have been constantly soliciting for donations to help them fight climate engineering, which again, they're systematically denying. It's all just jet exhaust. How does that work? Exactly. Final footnote. Global climate engineering operations should not be confused with state and local weather modification operations, which are only used to distract populations from climate engineering operations. Honest and objective research is a must to gain a correct compass heading in this battle. Here's a nugget of wisdom from Carl Sagan. Quote, one of the saddest lessons of history is this: if we've been bamboozled long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken or fooled. Once you give a charlatan power over you, Sagan says, you almost never get it back. So very true. What does biblical scripture have to say about the path we're collectively sprinting down? This: therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that dwelleth there shall languish, with the beasts of the field, with the fowls of heaven, yea, the fishes of the sea also shall be taken away. Hosea 4.3. And from Henry David Thoreau, whose words and countless profound statements of observation of the natural world will forever echo through my mind, this one: thank God men cannot fly, lest they would lay waste to the sky as they have done to the earth. Too late, we're there. And this also from Henry David Thoreau: a town is saved not more by the righteous men in it than by the woods and swamps that surround it. No environment, no people. That's what he's saying. Yes, the horizon is damn dark, but the future is not yet decided. Again, we are the ones we've been waiting for. While you still can, make your voice heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. Sharing credible data from a credible source is key. For specific instructions, check the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for the activist suggestions link. Please march with us in this desperate battle for all that we hold dear. Every single day counts. Stay strong. Face to the wind. Never yield ever. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.